I am going to start with the Armed and Gorgeous palette. It's this beautiful palette with yellows and greens. And I am going to be cleaning my brushes on my color switch in between the shades so that I don't transfer anything. But I want to show you two different looks with this palette using all of the shades possibly. I'm going to start with the shade Access, which is a bright yellow. This shade is quite pigmented, I would say. It's not a bright yellow like Sugar Pill Buttercup, or Butter Cupcake actually, but you can see it shows up quite nicely and it blends well. My eyes are primed with primer and the crease set with translucent powder, and that is just the way I apply my primer always, so that is what I'm gonna do. Then I am taking the green shade, Top Secret, and applying this further in the crease. And you can see this green is not extremely pigmented, but you can build it up quite easily and it looks really good with all the yellows. It is not patchy and it works very well. It is not very dark either. So I will now go in with the darkest shade in this palette, which is the shade Prawl, to deepen the outer corner. And this is the way I would use this shade, and I thought it was more relevant to show you like this than to do full eye swatches where I probably wouldn't use a matte all over the lid, at least personally. And sorry for looking down, but of course I'm looking in my mirror. On the middle of the lid, I'm gonna put the shade Coin, which is a very beautiful yellow gold. This one reminds me the most of the yellow in the Kat Von D palette, and you can see this is with a dry brush. You can get quite a nice top coat type of effect with it, and it has a bit of a larger shimmer than the other shades in the collection. If I wet my brush with Fix Plus and I go in the shade Coin again, you see how metallic it can become. That is absolutely gorgeous. Then I'm going to take the shade Classified and use it on the outer corner. Just a little bit. And for the inner third of my eye, I'm using the shade Guilt Trip, which is a lighter gold shade. You can see compared to the metallicness of the foiled shade is nothing, so I will wet my brush again. And I do this to show you the difference, of course. I am not particularly upset that these shades need to be wet to work well. I don't mind too much. But you can see that the effect is really beautiful. I'm going back just with the brush I had used before with this yellow to blend them in together. You can see how beautiful and shiny this shimmer shades are once wet. Now let's move on to the other eye, and I am going in with the shade Secure. The thing that I am a bit sad about in this palette is that the shade Secure and Agent are two very similar orange shades. This one is a little bit harder in the pan compared to the others, but you see that you can layer it well and the pigmentation is there, so I'm not upset about it at all. This is also one that will not swatch very beautiful on a first swipe, but you can see that on the eye it's fine. Then I'm going in with the brown shade Smooth Criminal and applying this in my crease, deeper in my crease I guess, and on my outer V. And this is a very nice and warm shade of brown. It fits really well with the rest of the shades. And it gives a really nice shading effect. Then I go again in with Prowl, the dark brown, because it's the only dark shade in this palette that I can use to deepen the outer crease. And you can see it maybe better here compared than with the green on the other side, how nice and dark and deep it is. Just going in again to blend all of it. And here I want to show you the shade Classified on the eye, on the lid rather. I'm gonna apply it first with a dry brush. You can see that not much is coming off. This shade reminds me a lot of one of the shades in the original Jaclyn Hill palette, just a different undertone. I'm gonna spray my brush and show it to you wet. The texture of this one is much more oily and chunky when you look at it in the pan, but you can see that the effect is a very nice foiled effect. And to be honest, I think I said this again, why do you need to add concealer when you can do half cut creases just with a wet brush? But I do think that this is one of the most beautiful shades in this collection, very unique. Then for the inner corner, the white shade VIP, and this is dry. So this gives a beautiful luminosity to any look. You can wet it to make it even more luminous and blinding, but I think this is pretty as is. Then to show you the last orange in the palette, I'm taking the shade Agent underneath the eye. And here you can see a little bit the difference between Agent and the shade that we used on the upper. This is a little bit more pumpkin and squash type of orange, whereas the other one is a little bit more wearable. I'm going to intensify it a little bit to show you that it is just tending a little bit more to a brown than a squash orange. I don't know how to explain it, but I hope you can see the difference between the two shades. And I hope this helps for this palette. That is all. I'm gonna remove my makeup and start over with the next one. Now we're going to use the Ring the Alarm palette, which is the palette that concentrates on reds and oranges with some berries in there. Again, my eyes are primed and set with a translucent powder. And I'm gonna start by going in with the shade Rush in my crease. Then I'm taking the shade Framed and applying it on the outer corner and further in my crease. This is one of my favorite shades in here. It's super pigmented, very beautiful. I now applied a lot of it, as you can see, but it is very easily blended out and it works really well. I really like that they added some berries to this orange palette to make it a little bit more sunset-like and then more interesting to work with. I'm going back and forth with those two shades to blend them together. The shade Rush that I used at the beginning is another one of these warm orangey transition shades that I think there are so many both in these palettes as well as in Jaclyn Hill's original palette and I don't know, Modern Renaissance and in Soft Glam by Anastasia. So I'm not sure we needed so many, but nevertheless, I am going to take a dry brush and the shade Lolly to show you how that applies with a dry brush to the first half of my lid. This is a duochrome with a golden shift and a more rosy base. You probably can see the swatches better in my blog post that I will link down below, but you can see this is now a nice shimmer without particular metallic properties. I will wet my brush and go in again. And this is now a very pretty duochrome lid. Then on the center of my lid, I will go in with the shade Pomas and that same brush And this was a very big surprise for me because I thought this would be a matte shade. Instead, it was a shimmer. So I also got my dupe wrong there because I picked a matte shade. I anyways don't have a shimmer of this color, so that is good for me. This is the same brush I used for the other shade, so it's a little bit wet and you can see that the application is very nice. To deepen the outer corner a little bit more, I'm gonna go in with the darkest shade in the palette, which is Secret. And just a little bit out here. Fluffy brush to blend everything together. And here we go, the first eye done. Moving on to the other eye, I'm taking the shade Mugshot in my crease. And this is this very trendy pukey brown. Again, I think there are plenty on the market like this, but it's still a very nice shade. I think there is something that is called pukey in the original Jaclyn Hill palette, so that is a little bit maybe of a double. Nevertheless, it's another warm transition shade. I still don't think you need so many in your life. Some may say you never have enough warm transition shades. Then I'm taking the orange in the palette, Alert, and putting it in the crease. And this is quite a bright orange. Now it's a bit muted by the other shade that is underneath, but it's quite a nice bright orange. Different from the ones from the Armed and Gorgeous palette, but still an orange, I would say. And you can see these all blend fine. I have no problems using them at all. In the inner part of my crease, I'll use the shade Siren, which is another berry that I didn't use earlier. This is a little bit more muted than the one we used on this eye. And this one also blends nicely. And maybe it's a little bit more wearable for some. I don't mind wearing really bright shades, so for me it works anyways. And just to give you an idea, it gives a very nice shade to the eye look. Then I'm going in with the shimmers. First I'm gonna put Boom, the orangey shade, in the center. This is a dry brush. You can see this works quite well by itself. I find that these little essence brushes are extremely good at this because they are a little bit frayed from many years of use, I guess. Let's see if I can focus on them. And because they're a little bit used, you can actually pick up quite a lot of product with it. Then I'm going in with the gold that is in here, that is called On Camera, and applying it on the inner part of my eye to give this beautiful fiery transition. I really love this combination, and this is a look that I did a lot. If you check my Instagram, you've seen this a lot. Then again, I am going in with a smaller brush and a little bit of the darker shade on the outside of my crease, the outer V, just to apply a little bit of depth, English. And here we have the other look using the rest of the shades in the Ring the Alarm palette. As you can see, all of these worked really well, and I have no problem at all at applying them. I'm gonna now take it off and come back with one more. Now we're going in with the Bling Boss palette, and this is all about the purples and berries. I love this color scheme. I'm starting with the shade Hush Hush, which is kind of the only transition shade in this palette. It is a mauve, cool toned transition. It is quite a nice shadow color. It looks very natural. If you would just go out like this, you would have corrected hooded eyes and you're good to go. and this works very well. Then I'll go in with the shade Sparks, which is a red matte, and this is also one of my favorite shades in this palette. Very beautiful, blendable. It's less dry than Fahrenheit by Nabla Cosmetics, so it blends a little bit easier. And color-wise, it's very, very similar. I know Letizia asked, so I wanted to address it here, as well as I did in my Instagram stories. And you can get quite a nice pigmentation of red in there. In my outer corner, I'm going to apply the shade Mystic, which is a dark warm-toned purple. Again, blends nicely, does not go on patchy. I know other YouTubers like That Girl Shay did a whole eye swatch video of these, and she was really not impressed. But I have not had any issues with the shades, and most of them I wouldn't apply all over the lids, especially the mattes. So I don't know how representative those swatches are. For sure you can see how they perform, but I find that most mattes, if applied all over the lid, will go on patchy. On my lid I am going to apply the shade Pizzazz, and this is with a dry brush. You can see this is one of those that applies a little bit worse with a dry brush, so I will wet it and go back over it for more metallic sheen. This is like a beautiful deep smoky eye. I like it very much. I'm going to use the shade Glitz and Glam on my inner third of the lid. This is with a dry brush. And you see this is a nice, not too light, cool toned champagne-ish. I can go over with a little bit of Fix Plus to see how it looks, to show you how it looks wet. And this is just much more booming, let's say. Not a inner corner highlight, that's what I wanted to show you, but you can see it's a little bit too dark, so it actually casts a shadow. There is one shimmer shade that I don't know what to do with in an eye look, so I'm gonna take the shade Ballsy with a dry brush and apply it on my lower lash line here. And hopefully it shows you its color. You can see that again here, you can see very little with a dry brush. I'm gonna wet it. And the Ballsy is a difficult shade. I haven't not been able to dupe it. It is a cool toned shade that looks very much like my own skin tone. It has a purple base, but the sheen on top is quite mid-toned, and I hope you can see it right there. Sorry for looking in the camera. Moving on to the other eye, I'm using again the same transition shade, as there aren't any others, and I always like to correct my hood with a transition shade. Then I am going to go in with the other berry that I love, which is called Rockstar, and this is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I like that in this vault there's 3 of these shades. So there's the red, there's this that is more purple, and the one in the previous palette that is more berry, aubergine. And these are shades I absolutely love because they're not so dark that you cannot bring it up into towards the brow bone like I'm doing. This is the way I show color in my eye looks anyway, so I really like to have all of these mid-tone shades that are matte and that will give me a nice blend and color to my eye looks. And here we have Rockstar. Then on the lid I am taking the shade Gem, which is a beautiful purple. This is with a dry brush. And you can see that there is definitely pigmentation, so you can apply it to an opaque layer. It takes a little bit of work, and the shimmer is not as obvious. But that is, yeah, nothing weird. I'll wet my brush so that you can see. This is with a wet brush. The effect is so much stronger. I am not blaming or dissing the formula because of this. I have absolutely no problem with it. This is a beautiful, beautiful purple, also quite unique in my collection. I don't have anything like this. On my outer corner, I'm gonna take the shade Berry Treasure. This is a very dark base, as you can see, pretty much black, with some multi-dimensional glitter. So the problem I have with this is that I don't see the glitter. So not on the eye at least, but it works as a very deep darkening shade, I guess. Now I put a ton of it, but I think it shouldn't be a problem to blend this out at the edges. And you see that they play quite nicely together. Taking again a little bit of Rockstar to pull back that purple again on the hood. And for the inner corner, the shade Bling Bling, which is a cool toned champagne. You can see now down here the fallout from the purple, and this is from packing it on without a Fix Plus. So I'll have to take that off, but here you can see also the shade Bling Bling. Let me take this off quickly. So here is my under eye without concealer, but at least you can see the shades a little bit better. And this was the Blink Boss palette. We used all the shades here as well, and you can see you can make quite a different array of different looks. And the final palette we're gonna take a look at is the Dark Magic palette. This was the one I was the most excited about. This is the Smoky palette of the bunch. Again, my eyes are primed and set with a translucent powder. I am going to start by going in with Poof. This is a very nice transition and base shade, I would say. It's a little bit peachy. You can see on my skin tone, it's pretty much the same shade. I'm gonna put it on both eyes because that's the first shade that I would use anyways. And it gives you a little bit of a base of which to work on. We will start with the most problematic shade of the bunch. This is the lighter army green shade called Potion. So I had this, tried this before, and I couldn't get a nice blend out of it. I showed you on my Instagram stories as well. This is unfortunately quite a patchy eyeshadow. And it takes a little bit of work to get it on the eyes. What helps for sure is having so many layers of powder underneath. It blends definitely better. You can see that it's not perfect, let's say. This is the most problematic shade in the whole Vault palette. It was before they postponed the launch, and it still is now. But we will move on. I am now taking the deep green shade that is called Inside Job, putting this on the outer corner. This is a nice forest green, quite dark, but you can see that the color still comes through. I really like that. And this being a bit darker, it's not something that I would put all the way up in my crease and that has to blend so perfectly out. You can see there is a little bit of patchiness here, but you can always add more and then that will go away. I am not upset at this shade not being the best blending one because it's not the nature of the use of it, I think. So on a shade like this, this is what I would do with it. Use it to deepen the crease, and you can see it blends nicely with the other shade, even though the other shade is now turning muddy because it's just not a very good shade. On my eyelid, I am going to use the shade Trickery. which is a shimmery green. And this is with a dry brush. You can see, again, you can get, just like with the purple, coverage and a little bit of shimmer, but I want more shimmer, so wetting my brush and putting it all over the lid. And this combination of the dark green with the shimmery green, I really, really like. This is definitely something I would use in the future. You can go and intensify the green in the outer corner again, that we kind of blended away. Or with a smaller brush, I'm gonna take the black in this palette and apply it out here. You can see it works quite well, not patchy, it blends out nicely and it deepens really, really well this look. You can do a lot with the black in a palette, especially in a smoky palette. And this is called Temptress, and in the pan you see it as it has a little bit of glitter, but it, at all intents and purposes, it shows up as a matte. I guess you can see here on the outside of my eye a little bit of fallout from that black. Nothing weird there. When you do such a dark smoky eyes, I would definitely do my eyes first and then do the rest of my makeup. Then I want to show you the lighter shade of silver that is in here. It's not really a highlighting shade, but I can show it to you here. It will look very beautiful on the lid. You can see it here. And this is with a dry brush. Unfortunately, the shimmer is very silver and beautiful, but then the base is a little bit darker, so it's more of a lid shade. Let me see, if I drag it on top here, you'll see it better probably. With a little bit of the green underneath. And it gives just a little bit of a shimmery effect there. On the other eye, I already have the shade Poof, the light shade in the crease. I'm going to go with the shade Shh, which is a neutral brown transition, I think. And this is nice because it will serve you well for any color smoky eye you do. So I'm happy there's this, because the shade Potion, that green we used earlier, didn't work out. And here you can see also how it's not too warm, it's not too cool toned on the eyes, and it just gives you that shadow. Then something I was extremely excited about is the blue shade. It's called Busted, and here it is on the eye. Now keep in mind it's a blue, so those are never easy to make, and especially in matte form. So this is not excellent as a shade, but I cannot be angry at it, to be honest, because it looks really pretty. It blends nicely. As you can see up here, it blends quite nicely. If I take a smaller brush and go pack it in this outer corner here, it will do its job quite well. Again, for these looks, we will have some fallout, inevitably so. Okay. And you see that it just didn't attach properly here. Again, yes, this is not ideal. The formula can be better, but if you look at the blend up here, it blended quite nicely out. I'm not upset about it, I have to say. It's not perfect out here in the outer corner, but I'm not angry at it, let's say. Then with a dry brush, I'm going into the last shimmer we have to try, which is the shade Diversion. And I'm applying it dry over my lid. You can see here that there's not much coming off, so I'm gonna wet my brush. And here we have it. My battery died, but I was showing you how this is a nice, I don't know, slate gray shade, very pretty. Then with the other side of my brush, I'm gonna take Power Cut again, the silver, and put it in the first half of my eye to give it more dimension. And this is also how I would use these two silvers. You can see you go from a little bit of a darker to a little bit of a lighter silver. Then another shade we still need to use is the dark brown called Mojo. And I'm putting this in the outer V. This is also quite a difficult shade, not one of the best ones. And again, now that you look at it, you can see it's skipping here in the same spot as the blue. It is something that happens to me on my eyes. It could be the way the primer set right there. And this was also Mojo on my eye. With all my fallout, these were the looks I did for the Dark Magic palette. I have been wearing this green smoky eye quite a lot. I've been also loving to use this dimension on the grays, not with the blue in the crease per se, but yeah. Overall, this palette has much more difficult shades to make in general, so you have to keep that in mind. Dark matte blues and greens are hard to make. However, no, this is not perfect. Like the formula can be improved. I think it's wearable and usable. And if you buy the Vault, you will not be disappointed, because this is the palette that has the problems, whereas the other three I think you can wear very easily without having to look at particularly difficult shades.